Combining the best of daily fantasy and survivor pools, Stat Hero is the next chapter in fantasy sports. No more competing with the sharks or experts ever, because your only competition is Stat Hero itself. The face of DFS has changed. Finally, a game designed for the rest of us.
Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. We have 2 weeks remaining in the fantasy football regular season for a lot of you out there. And of course, we know every single week you need those wins. You need to dive into matchups to get you the most points out of your starting lineup. So let's do that for you here on this video. Wide receiver cornerback matchups. We'll take an advanced look at the position, give you 2 upgrades and 2 downgrades. Let's start with those upgrades. And hey, you're starting Julio Jones anyway. We know that, but you must be happy to know that there is a big-time upgrade for him in this contest. Tampa Bay's secondary has been extremely fantasy-friendly so far this season, and Jones is going to see his share of Carlton Davis. Over his last 3 games, he's given up 4 receiving touchdowns. Of course, in this contest, you're upgrading pretty much everybody on the other side. Mike Evans, sure. Chris Godwin, sure. But everybody out there with Calvin Ridley, his matchup is just as good as Julio Jones, so we're upgrading him this week. Calvin Ridley's a top 10 play, so if you have him, you absolutely have to be happy about that. All right, let's go to our other upgrade. And this one, well, maybe you might be thinking about sitting him after last week. Allen Robinson. Yes, it was a down week last week, but let's face it, it was against the Rams. He did see a shadow from Jalen Ramsey, and what we saw was Mitchell Trubisky just did not want to throw at Jalen Ramsey. Now, of course, Trubisky looks like he's not going to play this week, so Chase Daniel under center. But I don't think it really matters for Allen Robinson because it's all about this matchup. We know that all season long you've been able to throw all over the New York Football Giants. So far this season, their trio of starting corners is giving up an average of 14.9 yards per catch. 14.9 yards and 10 receiving touchdowns in their coverage so far this season. Allen Robinson poised for a big bounce back this week. Make sure you get him in your lineups. All right, let's go to the other side of the coin because for the good, there's also the bad. So our bad matchups this week, unfortunately, we're going to start with Amari Cooper. Well, this is a tricky one because, okay, last week, the injury, it was obviously bothering him. Likewise, he did have a tricky matchup last week against Darius Slay. He's full in practice this week, but he's far from 100%, plus the fact Cooper faces the New England Patriots. We know that's been tough all season long, regardless of who you are at wide receiver. It's a downgrade. So what do we expect from him? We expect a shadow from Stephon Gilmore in this contest so far this season. Gilmore's been awesome. 46% catch rate in his coverage. No touchdowns allowed. He's been stellar. He'll be tracking Cooper on most of his routes, which puts a big-time damper on Amari Cooper. Now, if you own Amari Cooper in season long, I know it's tricky. It is certainly tricky, but I don't like to overthink things at this time of year because, as I said at the top of the video, hey, you need a win, I need a win. We all need wins at this time of year. And the way that we do that is not necessarily getting cute with our lineups. Sure, you could get cute and start a guy who's maybe the 35th wide receiver who, yes, may have upside or might even have a better matchup than Amari Cooper. But think about it. If you played this game 100 times or 1,000 times, how many times is Amari Cooper likely to score more points? And I guarantee you it's more than 50%. Therefore, we make this play. Amari Cooper is still at least a front-end wide receiver to play, even in this tough matchup, even banged up. He's put up numbers this season while being banged up. So just keep that in mind. But yes, it is a matchup downgrade for Amari Cooper. Long story short there. All right, well, let's stick with another Cooper. Cooper Kupp, who has been backsliding over the last 2 games after his really scorching hot start to the season. Unfortunately, though, I don't think it's going to change this week. I think the backslide continues because it's up against this Baltimore Ravens secondary. And I tell you what, yes, New England is spectacular. San Francisco is spectacular in the secondary, but Baltimore is pretty darn good as well. Since they've added Marcus Peters, it's a different dynamic to the secondary. Of course, they got Jimmy Smith back as well. Marlon Humphrey playing good out of the slot. And then they're able to use Brandon Carr in their sub package, so you essentially have 4 corners on the field when they go to sub package. And against the Rams, they're basically going to be in sub package almost 100% of the time, given how much 3 wide receiver sets you see from the Los Angeles Rams. So with Cooper Kupp out of the slot primarily, he's going to see a lot of Marlon Humphrey. Marlon Humphrey is a pretty good corner, as I mentioned earlier. That puts a damper on things for Cooper Kupp. plus the fact that we don't know if Robert Woods is going to play. We do think Brandon Cooks plays, but if a defense is able to focus their attention on Cooper Kupp, it doesn't necessarily mean the best things for fantasy purposes. So earlier in the season, it looked like Cooper Kupp was going to be an elite fantasy wide receiver, and he put up those types of numbers. Now, as we're getting into the middle and towards the end of the season, I think we're really looking at him more as a front-end wide receiver 2, back-end wide receiver 1. Hey, with 4 teams on bye this week, I'm not going to overthink it. I'm still playing him as a back-end wide receiver 1, but just be aware, this is a matchup downgrade for Cooper Kupp. Where the heck do I get all this information? Well, you know where I get it. At PFF, we have the wide receiver cornerback matchup chart. It is often imitated but never duplicated. We have the original for you, chock full of information on these matchups. We also have one for tight ends and one for offensive line, defensive line matchups as well. That plus rankings, projections, all kinds of fantasy stats, all kinds of regular football stats, and just football information galore. All of that is over at PFF.com.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.